Fuck it, let's do it live. In all 50 states, bitch, I did it all without no citizenship. You can't look at me and tell me about no limits. That's how we make music. Fake shit, rock 50 stages in all 50 states, bitch. I did it all without no citizenship. You can't look at me and tell me about no limits.
For Complex News, I'm Simpson here. Got to my left, Rich Brian.
Hey, man, how you doing?
How you doing, man? Let's get right to it, man. When and where did you start recording songs for The Sailor?
For The Sailor, I would say it started a long time ago. I mean, like the first time I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make an album.
Right.
It was probably a year ago in Indonesia, and but there's some songs on this album that I started working on probably like even longer than that. Like when I'm just in LA and like not really thinking about making an album, but I'm just kind of making songs, and it ended up just like fitting really well. There was a lot of kind of figuring things out as we go on this album. I think in the middle of it we're like, okay, this is what the concept's gonna be, and then this is kind of like, you know, we're gonna start to make songs that you know that fit with this concept, but. Yeah, it's like luckily, like
right,
the songs are like they fit pretty
for
well.
Sure,
so,
what would you say that concept is of The Sailor?
The Sailor, The Sailor, I would describe it as so The Sailor is myself, which is, you know, the sailor is an explorer, is somebody who's not afraid to explore uncharted territories and uncharted waters, and somebody who just has really big dreams and just kind of like is really determined, and you know that's what I feel like I am, and that's. You know, like my experience was I went to the US when I was 17 years old. I came here by myself without my family, and I just kind of like, I came here just to follow my dream. And, you know, me looking back at it now, I'm just like, that seems like a really crazy experience. I don't know how I did that, because I don't remember being scared when I did it. And I think it was just because I was so determined that I didn't have time or space to be scared.
So I guess through your journey now, you kind of feel like it was more treacherous than you even thought about.
Yeah, but as crazy as it was, you know, I know that I'm not the only one that has that experience or like that wants to feel that way. So I feel like there are a lot of kids out there that feel the same way, so I want them to listen to this album and be able to relate to it.
For sure. At what point in time did you feel that direction was taking place with Sailor, where you kind of had a cohesive thing? You were like, okay, this is the vision I want. It
started when when I made Yellow. That was like the earlier songs that I worked on in this album, and that was I would say that happened during like a weird kind of time in my life where I went through like a 4-month writer's block. I couldn't make anything, and it was just kind of like, all right, so what now, kind of thing. And when I heard that instrumental for the first time, I was definitely super just like suddenly inspired by it, and it was like, it felt like a movie with 3 acts, kind of like, that's kind of how I felt when I heard that. I was just so inspired to write about how I felt at the time. And I wasn't even thinking about the whole concept of, you know, the sailor or yellow or kind of like the whole Asian identity or anything like that, but I was kind of writing about how I felt. So, but then when I heard the second part of the beat, like kind of like the second act of it, you know, the whole beat kind of switched up and turned into this super like hopeful kind of, you know, this whole different vibe. And then when I heard that, I'm like, oh wow. I feel like that was when I realized, you know, kind of the platform that I have and just kind of the opportunity that I have to, you know, talk about this topic that I've never touched on before, and I feel like this was the right time to do it. And then, you know, after that, the whole, you know, we came up with the whole like sailor concept.
The whole concept of like being on the ship, you know, and it's an analogy obviously for anyone on so many levels that like at first you do what you need to do. Right, and then if you learn what it is about that process that gets you from A to B, then you can go back and do it for other people. That's how you graduate to captain. Yeah. Right. I don't know. That'd be crazy.
That's pretty much what
like
you're saying.
Sailor, because you said it in it.
It's also a metaphor on just like immigrants and you know, people that have came to either America or any country. You know, like people that have left their hometown to, you know, to go through, like to explore something like a better life, basically.
What was interesting to me is the fact that you had writer's block for 4 months. Right?
Yeah.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Looking back on it now, do you think you found out what the root of that writer's block was?
I think the root of the writer's block. It wasn't me being uninspired. Actually, it was me. It was a lot of overthinking. I think it was a lot of just kind of me. Like every time I start a project, I'm like, oh, is this like too whack, or like, or does this not sound like me, or like, are people not gonna like this? And I would think so much about just the like, when am I gonna release this, and like all that stuff. That flow's kind of weird right now. And then one day I just went to my friend's house, and then we're like, yo, you wanna make a song? And then I'm like, yeah, sure. And then we just made a song, and then it was like, I didn't think much of it. And then I realized like, oh, I made a whole song. I haven't done this in a while. And then that's when I realized like, you know what? Every little song idea that I have, like no matter how whack it is, I'm just gonna do it. And then started doing that, and I realized I was like, oh shit, like I'm actually making songs that are, you know, that are better than my previous stuff. And that was when I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make an album.
So essentially you kind of had like a fuck it moment. You was like, I'm gonna just do whatever I need to do, I'm gonna just do it.
Yeah.
Okay, and I feel like a part of that ties into your sense of humor. You're a very funny guy.
Thank
How
you.
much do you carry that into the studio, or do you try to separate the two and kind of just dive into the music?
I don't think, on this album specifically, I think I tried to bring as much of my personality into the music. So I think it's like this album's where I realized that you can truly talk about anything on a song. Like
you just now realized that you talk about anything else.
Yeah, exactly. No, because like, you know, this whole time I'm like still trying to figure out kind of what my writing style is.
Gotcha.
And I used to be so focused on just kind of like flows and like, you know, stuff like that. I'm not really. I used to not really look into the words too much.
Right.
And this time I'm like, that shit really matters, and you know what I mean, and you can literally talk about like a bad day that you had, or like a funny painting that you saw, or something like that, as long as you kind of word it in a way that is listenable, and like that's just it works. And then on this album I tried to be, you know, like a lot more vivid with my words, and kind of like a lot more clear, and definitely not sacrifice, you know, lyrics for flows.
You hating on me, but you know I got it. You big in your city, I'm the king of a continent. These rappers trying to make the trending topic. Why the state of music going south, but I don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah, I would say on this album I'm like putting a lot more of like my personality into it, and if it like needs sense of humor, then I'll put my sense of humor into it, you know.
Yeah, I think the way you describe that kind of shows a lot of growth that you've had personally as an artist, kind of realizing that you can do these different things. What sparked that growth? Was it something internally, or was it like outside influences that were like, okay, I need to kind of take things more serious, maybe?
I think, I feel like it was internal. I think it was just like me. I think it was part of me realizing that, you know, like I should be able to make what I like to make, and you know, also I think a part of it is also just me just missing that whole, like, I used to listen to a lot of albums on YouTube, like when people just re-upload albums, like whole albums, and I just listened to like the whole thing, and then I would listen to like Acid Rap by Chance the Rapper, or like Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar, and like MF Doom and stuff like that. And like I would listen to whole albums, and I would just kind of sit there and just listen to the whole thing all day, and then I just missed that whole experience. And I just like, in a lot of these albums I feel like they show a lot of personality, and they show a lot of just like, I don't know, like their own unique thing. And then I miss also just kind of like that whole listenability of just albums from front to back. I feel like people don't really do that anymore.
Absolutely.
And I just, you know, and I love when artists just don't. My favorite thing is seeing like artists, whether it be new artists or like artists that I've known about, like put out something and you could tell that they don't care about what people think. You know, they could tell, like you could tell that, you know, this is what's trending, and they're like, fuck that, you know what I mean? So I really wanted to make it a point on this album that like I'm trying to make what I like. I'm trying to make what I've always liked listening to growing up.
And with that, having that mindset, you may lose some people that want to hear you a certain way. Does that scare you at all?
Definitely did it in the beginning, but then I realized like, if I put this out and I truly love this album, I don't care how many streams it has, like, because streams don't really, you know, as much as it matters, and as much as, you know, like bigger streams means you're a bigger artist or whatever, but at the same time it's like, I want to impact people a lot more. I feel like that's a lot more important, and I feel like that's how you get, that's how you get people that love you for years and years, and just like people that, listen to your album like 20, 30 years from now. And I wanted to make sure that like that was where my focus is, and I wasn't really focusing on just having a huge album this week, because when the album came out, there was like. There was a lot of other albums and like huge albums that came out, and I had no idea that, you know what I mean? And when I found out, I was like, oh my God, I'm so fucked. But at the same time, it's like, it's like I want people to be able to listen to it and then, just like take their time on it and take it in, and I feel like you can feel that, you know what I mean?
Right. As an artist, whenever you mentioned going through the writer's block, you mentioned not putting out things for a while, but you may see other artists that are your peers or your contemporaries putting out music. Do you ever kind of internally think to yourself like, okay, I had to get going, and then you may force work and force music that may not be good? Did you ever have a situation like that?
Totally, definitely. I've definitely been through that, and on this album, I think is where I realized that there's a lot of pressure as an artist. There's a lot of pressure from just your peers and just like your fans, because there are a lot of people that are like, yo, where's the album? Exactly. And like, where's the new song? And I don't know, I feel like I realized that I hate the term falling off. I feel like the only way to fall off is if you're putting out shit that's mediocre. You're always putting shit out, and you're not vacant, but like, you're not putting shit out that you love, and you're not putting your 100% into it. I feel like that's the only way you could fall off, you know what I mean? I'd rather be gone for like 2-3 years and then come out with something crazy.
But what's your favorite story from the creation of the album? Do you have one that sticks out to you?
My favorite story, I think on this album, I collaborated a lot on this album, a lot more. So Bacon and the Donuts and those guys, amazing producers. They executive this album, like they executive produced this album with me, and I spent a lot of time in the studio with them, and I think this is like, I'm not used to like collaborating with people that much, because that the way I started was like I would just make
a lot,
I would just make stuff in my room and stuff like that. But then working with these guys is just so crazy, because they're the most musically talented people ever, and the way these guys work is they would just everybody like it would just like be 6 producers, and then everybody would be like connected to some sort of instrument. Like somebody would be on a guitar, and then somebody would be on a drum machine, and then somebody would be on the keyboard, and it's all connected to like the computer, and then everything's being recorded live, and then there would be a mic in the middle of the room, and that's for the artist, and we would basically jam for like 3 hours, but it's all being recorded, and then in those 3 hours we would come up with like 20-30 different ideas, and then at the end of the night we would listen back to it, and we're like, like which one of these do we want to turn into full song?
Is the jamming constantly for 3 hours, or is it more like, okay, somebody play a bass line, you're like, okay, I like that, and another instrument hop in there?
It's actually jamming constantly for 3 hours, because those guys are like, I feel like they've been doing it for so long. They're so synchronized, because like somebody would change something, and then everybody would follow them, and then like it would just happen constantly. And then what's really cool about that is like it brought a lot out of myself that I didn't even kind of expect, because there was like a lot of there's a lot of like spontaneity, and like I feel like a lot of cool things came out of it.
You sound like a fucking rock star when you do that shit, bro.
And but at the same time, like, I was collaborating a lot with those guys, and, going to the studio a lot, but then there are a lot of things that were made outside of the studio, I feel like. I was paying a lot more attention to, like, when I'm outside, I hear kind of people talking, and then I'm like, oh, that's a cool sentence, I would write it down, and then, I would take a lot of things that I've heard outside of the studio and then bring it in, basically.
Definitely. So why, at this point in time, did you kind of step back from self-producing and be more collaborative?
Honestly, just because we met Bacon and the Donuts, and their whole crew, and we just knew how crazy like talented they are, and I feel like if it was anybody else, I wouldn't have like been super like, oh, let's do this, you know what I mean? But knowing that it was them and they were down to executive produce this record with me, I was just like super down, and I was like, this is a crazy, once in a lifetime experience, and I feel like it's great. Those guys are just like the most musically talented people I know.
So for future projects, will you maybe go back to self-producing, or is that something that will always be a part of your repertoire?
I think self-producing is to me, I think all it is about just how easy it is. I wouldn't self-produce just to do it. You know what I mean? I feel like, you know, I when I was working with these guys, I actually went through a point where I didn't make a beat for like 3 months, just because I was only rapping on their beats because I just trusted them so much, you know what I mean? And that was, at that moment, that was what was easiest. And I think that's, you know, whatever's easiest, you know, whatever's like creatively, you know, whatever creatively helps you and makes you do things faster, then I feel like that's the best. I want people to like look at me in a way that like, okay, like he's trying to put something to the table. Right. I think that's the biggest thing.
Welcome to Sneaker Shopping with Complex.